Hi, Honey Family. Welcome back to another episode. If you like what you've been hearing, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, and share with your friends. Our regular podcast is back from our break, so you should be getting more consistent episodes coming soon. Now sit back and enjoy the show. Story 1. Shook me all night long. When I was 10, my family moved into a 3-bedroom condo in San Diego. After our parents signed the lease, they took me and my sister to go see the place, and to pick out our bedroom. My sister and I were to share a room, and make the other one a playroom. We picked the room we wanted. As my mom, me, and my sister were standing in the empty room, I said it smelled like peanut butter. Mom gave me a startled look, and then said, "Yeah, it kinda does. Someone must have had a sandwich in here while they were cleaning the place up." I wouldn't know why my mom looked so startled when I mentioned peanut butter until much later. About a week into living in the place, I woke up from a deep sleep in the middle of the night. My bed was shaking violently. I screamed out to my mom down the hall. I said, "My bed is shaking." My stepdad said it was probably a little earthquake and to go back to sleep. By then, my bed had stopped shaking, so I rolled over and fell back to sleep. The next night, the same thing happened. But the bed was shaking a little harder this time. It startled me so bad. I jumped up, and I ran down the hall to my parents' room. I woke them up, and I told them my bed was shaking again. My mother didn't feel any earthquakes or shaking, so she thought it was my imagination, and told me to go back to bed. A few nights went by, and nothing happened. Then, after about 3 or 4 peaceful nights, it happened again. My bed was shaking very hard. It felt like I was being bounced. My little sister seemed to always be very deep asleep, and would never wake up during the bed-shaking incidents. I stayed in bed, but I sat up, and I really screamed out for my mother to come in there right now. The bed was still bouncing, and my sister didn't even wake up after I'd even screamed for my mother. I heard Mom down the hallway saying out loud that this was ridiculous, but she got out of bed and started walking down the hall to my room. She planned on telling me it was my imagination, because the whole house was sound and quiet, and my bed couldn't be the only thing to shake if everything else wasn't. But as she entered my room, it was very dark, and she couldn't see my bed, which was still shaking very hard. She walked over to the edge of my bed and sat down to talk to me. The bed just shook her like it was shaking me and my sister. And then my mother realized that the bed was, in fact, shaking very hard, and it scared her. She panicked and said, "Go get into her bed right now." She scooped up my little sister, who was still sleeping, and we all slept in their bed that night. My stepdad said it was all our imaginations, but they never made me sleep in that room again. I usually slept downstairs on the couch from then on out. My mother later told me that the landlord had told them that an old man had died in that bedroom before we had rented it. He died from choking to death on a peanut butter sandwich. She had thought he meant the room we turned into the playroom, but found out it was really our bedroom. Story 2. I'm home, Mama. I must admit, I've never been much to believe in ghosts or the supernatural, until I had a rather chilling conversation with a friend of my mother's back in 1989. She was a Cherokee lady, and one day, at my friend's house, she began telling me of weird experiences that had followed her from place to place since childhood. As we talked, she told me the story of her daughter. Her daughter had been murdered in a park in Durham, North Carolina, in 1984. It seems that the next night after the funeral, she had a very strange dream, or so she thought. At about 3 a.m., she heard a knock on the door. She went to answer the door, and when she opened it, her daughter was standing in the doorway, wearing the dress that she had been buried in. Her daughter said, "Mama, I've come home. I'm home, Mama." She told me that she woke up immediately after this, but attributed the dream to the trauma of just having lost a child. The next morning, she was preparing breakfast for her 2 sons, who were around 10 and 12 at the time. They were playing in their sister's room, and one of them opened the closet door. They came running out of the room terrified, yelling, "Mama, Mama, the dress is in the closet. The dress is in the closet." Not knowing what they were talking about, she went with them into their sister's room. There, hanging in the closet, was the dress her daughter had been buried in the day before. I thought this was all crazy, saying, "Hell yeah, right." Then she proceeded to show me a couple pictures she had taken of her daughter in the casket right before they closed it. She showed me where there was a little blood on the collar, where the mortician had done a sloppy job. Her daughter had been very badly beaten. She then showed me the dress that had been hanging in the closet. It had the exact same blood marks on it as the dress in the picture did. I had unbelievable chills run down my spine. Even weirder, when I pulled out of their driveway that night, I looked in my rearview mirror, and her daughter was sitting in the back seat smiling at me. I turned around quickly, but she was gone. Nothing in my mirror either. I almost did not believe this, but it's funny how it takes something like this to get someone to really believe sometimes. This was my first, but not my last, ghostly experience. It seems like this opened a door for weird stuff, but I will never forget that night. Story 3. My Haunted Lifetime. My first ghost was one on my grandfather's farm. During the first settlement of the area, in around 1740, the first grant owner's sister went to get a cow. However, the Indians in the area had taken the cowbell off and were ringing it. They scalped her. She was buried where she died, in a field near the main house. On calm summer nights, we could hear the cowbell. Even those who didn't believe could hear it. They still didn't believe in ghosts, but it scared the daylights out of them. The ringing bell always seemed to stay just ahead of you, in the woods above the house, on top of the hill. There were always shadow shapes moving at the very edge. I was strictly forbidden from going up there, and it was strong enough that I didn't, which was strange because I was always doing things that I shouldn't, and things that I'd been told not to do. I found out later, when I was in my teens, that there used to be a house up there. No one would ever tell me what happened to it. My grandmother appeared to me after she died. She had raised me and was basically a mother figure for me. She would always show up when I was getting very sick, leaning over me and looking very concerned. I tend to feel ghosts rather than see them. I feel emotions. When I was in my teens, my aunt's elderly friend hadn't been seen for a day. My mother and a cousin went to check on her and found that she had broken her hip. The house was an original 1700s house, and I was excited to be able to go into it. As soon as I stepped inside the door, I was met with a feeling of such pure hate. I immediately became sick and had to leave. My mother, who never did believe in this stuff, said maybe I was picking up on the woman's feelings. I told her no, that house hates. It was hating something or someone so much you made yourself sick all over it. I never went back in that house again. I've also had what I call riders. There's a mountain area near here with dirt roads over it. I took it late one night as a shortcut. That way cut off 30 miles. I realized there was something in my back seat. It was like a rotting corpse. It stayed with me through the whole valley, from one mountain top to another. You have to cross 3 on this road, with very narrow valley in about a 10-mile stretch. And suddenly it was gone. He wanted to scare me, and he was enjoying it. A friend told me there had been a man who missed one very sharp curve and ran his buggy off the side of the road. They found his horse and his buggy, but they never found him. He was the first, but he was not the last. I have also noticed in the fall, while I was walking through the graveyard, the sound of footsteps following me through the leaves. That graveyard is where most of my family is buried. In boot camp, when we were punished with what we would call the cycle, it was exercises, including running in place. The housing is 3 stories high. We had the second floor. I slept on the bottom bunk. My bunkmate and I woke up one night to the sound of running feet and thumping. I said to her, "What's that?" And her reply was, "It sounds like they are cycling the guys upstairs. They must have done something to make their company commander mad." "At 1 a.m., I replied. We both rolled over and went back to sleep, for this wasn't unusual. It dawned on us the next morning that there was no company in the upstairs unit. I hated to patrol up there. The shower curtains would sway for no reason, and there was no air. I kept getting the feeling of fear, not being afraid, but a feeling of fear very similar to the hate feeling I felt in the house earlier. When I lived in Florida for a while, one of my cats escaped with a non-breakaway collar on. I heard her in the middle of the night and went out looking for her. I was worried about her hanging herself without a breakaway collar on. Coming down the road towards me was a glowing greenish figure that took the shape as I got closer. It looked like half raw muscle and veins, with exposed guts and eyeball. The other half was bare bones. It was not a pretty sight, to say the least. It was also grinning at me. I ran back into the house and woke my boyfriend up. I said, "There's a ghost outside," and I described it. He gave a chuckle and said, "Oh yeah, that's just old raw head and bloody bones. My grandfather used to tell me about him to scare us." He said, "Yeah, we all," mentioned the names of his family members, "have seen him." The house we currently live in has a mischievous ghost who likes to hide things and find things and move things around on us. Currently, we're looking for my logging boots, which would come in handy for impending snowstorms, but I can't seem to find anywhere. But we often hear loud noises and heavy footsteps tromping around in the attic, so maybe the ghost has the boots upstairs. I've made a deal with him. I won't go into the attic to bother him if he doesn't come down in the rest of the house to bother us, and he hasn't bothered us in a while. After all, a ghost needs his space.